Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile. This week, we're talking about 2014's Interstellar in our Nothing But Nolan series. Jake, did I hear this was the first time you've seen Interstellar?
Yes, this is the first time I've seen Interstellar. I know, shocking. Everyone talks about how this movie is so good. Um, I hadn't seen it. I didn't see it when went out in theaters. I haven't seen it until now. I remember we were talking about it in one of my film classes at Ball State, and the professor said, he said, "All right, if anyone hasn't seen this, you walk out because this is a major spoiler." And now I really want to email him and be like, okay, what was the part? Because I finally saw the movie and now I want to know what you were talking about,
What
because
professor?
Ben Strack.
That is such a Ben Strack
Yeah.
thing to do. Okay, yeah.
Um, but I want to know what part it was and what he was teaching from, because this is a really good movie. I knew this was a good movie, but watching it, I'm like, damn, this is a really good movie.
Yeah. It's this is my favorite Christopher Nolan film. And this rewatch cemented that for me. It's just spectacular. There's no other word to use. I mean, it is really out of this world. Um, and I wasn't even saying that as a joke. It is just such a
You kind of
spectacular
were. You
film.
kind of were.
Kind of were, yeah. But it's not, and so it's not just the visuals, because the visuals are great, but the direction and Matthew McConaughey,
Mhm.
and the premise. This this movie, you texted me that you said this is essentially like a better version of 2001: A Space
Yeah.
Odyssey,
It
and
so
I agree.
we've both seen 2001. We went and saw it with your
Together.
former roommate Daniel on the big screen, which is a really interesting experience. Um,
Yeah,
to,
watching any movie with Daniel's an interesting. No, I'm just kidding.
love you, Daniel. Um, but that movie, I know it's good and it's significant, but that is such a strange movie.
it, it
2001.
it is. It's
It is so cerebral for at least really, it's there's this middle section where we actually have a story with characters and people, and we get we understand some things, and then before and after that you're just what is this acid trip artistic experience? um
right.
and like I said, that's a good movie, but I feel like this movie is what 2001 was trying to be, because this movie it explores these so otherworldly and other dimensional concepts of space travel and quantum physics and time and relativity and traveling through wormholes and all this like crazy wacky stuff that we don't even know. We theorize that this is true. There was a theoretical physicist, what's Kip Thorne, Dr. Kip Thorne. He's one of the producers on this. Um, and so it's all rooted in theory, but no one's ever gone through a black hole before, so we don't know what would happen. But in the same way, this is such this has such heart to it, and it is has such an emotional pull for the audience, and I think that's indicative of one, really good performances, and two, really good direction story. um that you you are able to look past the the sciency parts of this and be drawn into the story. I feel the sciencey parts are cool, don't get me wrong. I loved all that, and seeing how that's all explained, and it was explained in a digestible way, which I really enjoyed. It didn't obviously you have to pay attention and absorb the information, but I didn't feel like it got too wacky that it went over my head. and I'm no science nerd. I mean, I I took the least amount of science classes possible because science and me don't always get along. But you keep being drawn back into this movie because we're so attached emotionally to our characters, especially Matthew McConaughey, I would say. He's definitely like our main emotional attachment, and by association, his emotional attachment to his daughter. So we're constantly drawn back into that. And I think that just helps move this story forward. And it also helps impact the audience in a way that a movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey fails to do.
Yeah, this I think has the emotional heart, like you said. But one of the things I noticed about this film is that, I mean, obviously there's a lot you don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
and that's totally fine. But I didn't feel like I had to understand it to understand the movie,
Mm-hmm.
because I would say for three-fourths of this movie, it's pretty straightforward when it comes to understanding what's going on, what the purpose of the mission is, things like that. But then when he goes into the event horizon, is like game over. It's like,
Yeah.
what the heck is kind of happening? But uh, I didn't feel like I needed to understand physics. I thought they did a really great job of giving us what we needed to know, but not too much to make it feel overbearing.
Mm-hmm. I
Um,
agree.
and that's the same for the setup for what's happening on Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear a little bit about blight, and obviously we see it's very dusty.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of dust, but we don't really go too deep into um, this. I guess it would be considered like a post-apocalyptic, in a way, reality, and
Yeah.
kind of what happened there. And I feel like they had a good sense. I think Chris Nolan had a good sense of what he wanted to accomplish with this movie, and didn't get sidetracked with all the other things that he could have.
Mm-hmm.
Like the worlds themselves, kind of building those out. You didn't really need to do that. They were all barren. Um, or NASA. I mean, so like you watch this movie and you simultaneously are like, I understand what's going on, and I also kind of don't.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm like, what's going on here? Um, and I just found that that is so interesting, because story doesn't necessarily need to make logical sense as
Mm-hmm.
long as you have an emotional reaction
Mm-hmm.
to character growth.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, like, you don't watch a movie necessarily to be like, yep, this all makes complete sense. Like, it's a work of fiction. And like this is a work of science fiction. You know, if we wanted to read if we wanted to have a story that like completely made scientific factual sense and that's it, go read a science textbook.
Right.
But like this is about telling a story rooted in people, and that's what I think where this movie is the biggest success is. It takes all this like otherworldly scientific astronomical, for lack of a better term, mumbo jumbo, and
Mm-hmm.
makes you care about it because you develop these great characters that we then care about.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of talk about the characters,
Mm-hmm.
because that really is the most important part of the story. Kind of starting off with Cooper. I think Matthew McConaughey's performance is so good. It's so Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah.
but it really is like his character, and kind of being like what it made it sound like is that this character kind of had his dream, or his version of his life kind of taken away, um in a way. And so he's kind of managing, but it's almost like he's kind of looking to the stars in a way, and then he gets
Mm-hmm.
this opportunity. um and obviously he's a dad, but there are so many moments like when he is watching the 23 years worth of
Oh my gosh.
videos.
I'm gonna cry again thinking about it.
He doesn't really say a word,
No.
but he just like he's crying, and it's not like a oh boo hoo kind of crying. I mean, it's almost like a you have kind of like a straight face, and this happens to me a lot when I cry. If it's about like um your face.
Crying techniques this week on the Cinefile.
Right. Um, and so I will sometimes have like a straight face, but the tears will just start rolling. And so he was just, and when, and this is Casey Affleck, when Casey Affleck's like, oh, my wife is telling me I need to kind of let you go. And you just see him go, like he doesn't say anything. He just kind of shakes his head. Like that is such a powerful scene. And I think that's what makes this movie stand out
Mm-hmm.
because you can have all the science mumbo jumbo you want. You can travel to different dimensions. But this movie, its main character, without even speaking, has so much depth
Mm-hmm.
to him that it just adds this extra dimension. No pun intended. Well, pun intended.
Your
For
puns are
welcome to
always
the pun intended in the
your puns
podcast.
are always intended.
Um, and I think his motivations, he makes the movie for me. He makes the movie.
Oh
This
yeah.
would be because this is a bit ethereal. It's a bit out there, and like I said, not everything really makes sense. But what does make sense is the emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I mean, I haven't necessarily been in that specific position, but the empathy I can like feel
Mm-hmm.
kind of what he's feeling just a little bit. And I think that makes this movie so compelling to watch.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this this is probably the best performance I've seen Matthew McConaughey give. Like if anything I've seen him in, it's definitely up there. Because like I mean, like you said, he bears it all. I mean, it's raw, it's um, it's
Yeah, it
real,
is really raw. Yeah.
it's raw, it's real, it's I don't know, it's just it's so captivating, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
so it draws you in from like the very beginning of this movie, and I just find that so interesting and fascinating to watch. I mean, it, I don't know. It's just seeing someone so like artful in their craft is just like fascinating to watch, right? And like
Yeah.
obviously acting is an art form, and like this is just like this is what acting is supposed to be, right? This is how it's supposed to be done, and the emotional response he elicits from the audience, like that scene, like I knew that scene was coming. I'd seen clips of that scene, but like
Right.
that messed me up a little bit. Not gonna lie, like it was just like I just kind of like needed a moment because like it is so raw, and as much as Matthew McConaughey makes that scene, on then the flip side, like Casey Affleck and Jessica Chastain playing his kids in those videos, like that has to be like quite the performance to live up to and like play it off against. Like one, like yeah, he's giving such a good performance, like you would say like oh like it should be easy, but at the same time like you have to try and match that, otherwise you're going to get lost in the scene, and I think they both match that pretty well. um and really I mean throughout the movie I feel like they match that, especially Jessica Chastain. I really liked this movie for her too. um I thought she was just phenomenal as Murph. I really all three of the actresses that play Murph, because we see Murph at you know three
Different
different
stages.
age spans. Like obviously,
Mhm.
it's there's a few years gone by in some of those sequences, but you see her as a child, as an adult, and then on her deathbed. but no, I thought all three actresses. Mackenzie Foy is who plays her
Yes.
as a child, and Jessica Chastain, and then Ellen Burstyn, who I really like her. Everything she's in, she makes better. I feel like she's one of those, and so uh, I really liked seeing how they strung that character together through three performances into one cohesive arc, and really being like, it's hard to describe what that character is because it's like, I almost want to say like the emotional antithesis of like McConaughey's character, because like it's obvious that you get this from the beginning of the movie that he seems closer to Murph than he is with his son.
Yeah.
And so like all of his emotion, like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he wants to get back and like see his son, but that's not who we're constantly having in frame of mind and who he seems to have in his mind all the time. It's Murph. His daughter seems to be the one that he's connected to, he's closer with. And so like the whole struggle of when he's leaving, he wants to go because he thinks this is what he needs to do to save his family, but at the same time, like, he doesn't want to go with his daughter so upset, and so it's just like it's this constant like pull. And when Murph leaves that video message for him, I feel like that like it shifts him into a different, he's still like raw emotionally, but like it's a different setting. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's just it's so their connection and their like duality, I guess is a good term.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're actually right when you say that she's almost the emotional antithesis, because for so much of the movie, Coop is thinking, okay, like essentially, I'm going to go save the world, right? I'm going to go find this. Yeah, I'll be gone a while, but I won't be gone so long. And I've done the calculations in such a way where it's only going to take me like, I'll lose like 7 years on this one planet, trying to, using time as a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that, but there's a switch where once he kind of comes to the realization that he's not going to be able to get back.
Yeah.
That's when Murph starts finding some hope.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes back to the house and is going through the stuff, and then finally comes up with oh wait, this dad was the person all along.
Yeah.
Which logically there's that's a bit of a stretch that you can like, I'm sorry, I don't care how smart you are, that's a bit
Yeah.
of a stretch. But it's interesting to watch. I mean, she gets so mad,
Mm-hmm.
and she's so mad for many years. And then the one time that she messages him is the day she turns the same age as him.
Yeah.
And we remember he's like, one day, hey, maybe we may be the same age. But there just comes this time where they meet very similar characters, right? Matt Damon's character is very similar to Alfred.
Michael Caine.
Uh, Michael Caine, uh, to Michael Caine's character. And so they both meet him, and then they have kind of differing, then there's like the switch. So it is an interesting kind of parallel.
Yeah.
um Almost like these emotional arcs are almost like circles as well.
Mm.
Kind of like how the way they play with time here is, it reminds me a lot of Harry Potter, and the Prisoner of Azkaban, because everything that has happened already happened, if you will.
Yeah.
um but I think, and her, I don't know, she's such an interesting character, because it would have been so easy for you to just say, okay, I'm mad, and she's going to be the mad character. She's going to be really mad at her dad for leaving.
Mm.
And yeah, that's very valid, but that's very shallow. There's not a lot of depth to that premise for a character. And we kind of see her evolve into wanting to save everybody else, and then eventually kind of reconciling with her dad in a weird way.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting because it's like she she's mad that he left, and she sends that video message when they're the same, the same age that he was when he left. She's that age. Anyways, she sends the video message, and there's such bitterness in that message. But
yeah,
then we see her, like, she's working for Dr. Brand, for Michael Caine's character, and like trying to like help him figure things out back on Earth, of like how they're going to get everyone off the planet, because she's been, sucked into this plan as well. And she's mad at her dad for abandoning the whole world, but really she's mad at him for abandoning her.
mm,
Um, for, as she sees it, he wanted to go out and try and save the world. And so she's like, okay, so I'm gonna go then. I'm gonna use my bitterness to, like, it's almost like this moment of like, I'm gonna prove him wrong and I'm gonna go save the world, when they're
right.
both working for the same end. But like they're so like there's such bitterness um in that relationship. And so it's just it's so fascinating to watch, I feel like. And to your point about like the when he goes, when he's on the other side of the bookshelf in the other dimension, and if we find out that he's Murph's ghost, as she calls him. Yes, that, to sit here and talk about that is an incredibly like strange, weird thing that like that makes zero sense at all.
Right.
But again, to the point of how good this story is, you've worked us up into such an emotional fervor. By the time we get to that point, we don't care.
Yeah, you're
I don't
right.
I don't care. I don't care that this whole like other dimension crap is which is like, I don't know, it's like the inside of a Rubik's cube. It's what it looked like. I don't care that it doesn't make sense. What I care about is he can literally see his daughter, but by they're separated dimensionally, but they seem so close. And there's conveyed this such desperate emotion of like, I want to get back to her.
Right.
That's all you
Right.
care about. That's all you feel in that moment. So again, that's just a testament of how well this story is told.
Yeah. The other character that I thought was really interesting in this film was Michael Caine's character, because you almost automatically trust him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he seems like the kind old professor. He knows what he's talking about. And then that reveal that he solved the equation years ago and he's just been proving a proof and kind of wasting time in a way because he knows that this mission isn't going to work. Like his, it just was so unexpected.
Yeah.
Like you did not see that coming, and they keep using the quote. And it's like the what is it? Let us not go
Oh, it's
lightly.
do not go gentle into that good night. It's a poem by, he's a Welsh poet, Dylan Thomas. And really, like, the poem itself is about resisting like growing older. At least that's the how I've always read it as. Um, and so it's interesting like how that plays into the story as well.
Because I kind of interpreted that as almost gentle into this good night, almost as, don't, sometimes you gotta be the bad guy in order to eventually kind of save the world.
Mm-hmm.
So like don't go gentle, or don't um sometimes you got to break some eggs to make an omelet kind of idea
Yeah.
is kind of what I kind of got from that. But man, was it, and I've seen this movie before, but it just was, I had totally kind of forgotten um that he literally is like, look, I sent you to start a colony.
Yeah.
That plan A was basically false hope,
Mm-hmm.
to get you to go on, get into that spacecraft. So I just thought that was also so compelling, because he believed he was doing it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes an antagonist so much more interesting than just being bad.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um,
Um, oh, go ahead.
while we're on the subject, there's two things I wanted to touch on. One, you brought it out already, but like how Dr. Brand, Michael Caine's character, and Matt Damon's character, Dr. Mann, are like almost the same character in a way because they're both you assume both of them are good, right? Because of what the other characters say about them. I mean,
Right.
Anne Hathaway's character, Brand, the Dr. Brand's daughter, she makes the comment that Dr. Mann was the best of them, you know, of those, what is it, 12, 13 that they send out,
Yeah.
the people they launched into the black hole to send back, like, hey, it's all good. And, you know, Matthew McConaughey's character knows Dr. Brand from when he was flying for NASA and like has like really gives the impression that he looked up to him, you know, and saw
Mm-hmm.
him as kind of a hero and good person. So then to find out that both of those men have lied for what they both think are justifiable reasons, um, and have really given up hope on or have both given up on plan A.
Right.
Um, Dr. Brain gives up on plan A because he thought it was mathematically incapable. Um, and so he lied to give people false hope. Dr. Mann has given up on plan A because he in his isolation let his selfish motives to see another person overtake him and you know cause him to send a false signal just so he can get a ship so he can you know not be
Yeah.
so you know not die in isolation. So they're an interesting pair in how like we see them as good but then both are twisted and like the way the story's structured like it's very like close together that it's revealed both of them have lied. So you're in this really like emotional valley. The story purposes we call it the dark night of the soul. It's
Yeah.
where things seem the bleakest. But like lining up those two events like sequentially to be like I'm pretty sure they're almost back to back.
Yeah. It's
Really,
almost like it's intercut.
yeah, you really just end up in this place of like, oh, they're screwed and it's a really interesting story device. So I thought that was really interesting the way those two characters were paired. Um, and then also I want to talk a little bit more about this poem. Do not go gentle into that good night that is quoted. So it's never correct me if I'm wrong. It's never diegetic, is it?
Um,
Like we hear the characters say it, but I does anyone ever say it directly to another character?
yeah.
They do.
Uh, yeah, when he's on his deathbed. When Professor Brand is on his deathbed, he
Okay.
says it out
Okay.
loud.
Okay.
Um, but he doesn't finish it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Now,
still to my
regardless, what is
point,
your,
I think that poem is really like it's kind of an interesting lens to look at each character because I think that poem means something would mean something different to every character.
mm,
Not going gentle into okay, by the night they mean the end, you know,
right.
the end of humanity, end of the world, end of your life, et cetera, et cetera. every character I think looks at that differently. Dr. Brand, he is willing to corrupt himself and not share the truth to preserve the future of humanity. That's his not going gentle, is lying about plan A so that way they can get plan B off the ground and establish this colony. Dr. Mann, do not go gentle. He's not content to just realize, oh, my planet's not habitable for life. I'm just going to end up dying and never see another person again. He resists that. And it's obviously a quote unquote evil interpretation, but it's out of his own human desperation. Matthew McConaughey is Cooper. When he realizes that, well, I think there's two ways to look at that. One, you could say, do not go gentle into that good night. He is going out to save the world and save his family. Mm-hmm. He's not going to let the world just die and his family die along with it. He's going to go out and save the world. But then also, he's not going to just let Dr. Mann kill him and go off and start the colony. He's going to still fight to survive and try, even when, all things seem stacked against him. Part of the spaceship blows up and they don't have enough fuel and they can't get home. They don't have enough time to get home. And he fights, he struggles to keep going. And then also Murph, I think, looks at that poem, is not willing to just accept that, oh, Dr. Brand is right. There is no plan A, can never work. We're just all going to die. No, she fights to find a way and find the answer and, ends up going back home and figures out the whole ghost riddle there. So I think that's such an interesting story device. And I know I'm kind of rambling on, but just the way, if you look through each character's point of view, what that would mean at different points of the story, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, this movie is not about space exploration. It's about people. It's about flawed people. And when their back is against the wall, what are they going to do? Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right that this is almost like a guide for the screenwriter, which is both Chris and his brother, Jonathan Nolan. Almost like a guide of how are we supposed to look at these characters? How are we supposed to show these characters on screen? And then the otherworldly aspect is the medium in which we convey these deeper emotional themes. And so, yeah, for each character, there is a different interpretation of this poem. And it's definitely a guidepost for this film for sure. The other thing before we kind of get to Rosebud and Thorn, I wanted to talk about was the score and the sound design. Again, this is a Hans Zimmer score, I believe.
It is.
And it adds so much.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it provides so much tension and it really guides the audience in how they're supposed to feel, which is the sign of a good score. But it's almost like it didn't take me out of the film. I noticed it, but it was like a good thing that I noticed it. I didn't notice it because it was bad. I noticed it because it was good. Yeah. And it just brought this, it just made it next level. I mean, so much. And when they would cut out, when they had exterior shots of space and there was no audio at all, I always like when they do that. It just made that I just think the score and the sound design just made this movie just that much better.
Oh yeah, I would agree. And it's really interesting how we use score, because like you pointed out, there are moments we cut away to exterior shots of the spaceship, and there's usually you have sound effects in space or in sci-fi movies, but in actual space, there's no sound made, because sound is vibrations traveling through air, and there's no air in space, so there's no sound then. And so I felt like it was like it made it all the more welcome, like how good this score was, because it really like it was really our only like emotional guidepost other than the performances, which like yes,
Right.
of course, like the score is always, you know, an emotional guidepost besides, you know, besides your characters and performances. But I feel like the way like you use like environmental sound or like nat sound, we call it in news, like I feel like that adds a certain can add certain, you know, emotions or convey certain things in your sound design. So when you don't have that, I feel like that the way that kind of pushes that burden off on the score in this movie, I think the score just really really shines. And it was interesting reading about this beforehand. um Chris Nolan, when he told Hans Zimmer that he wanted to do the score, he literally was like, I want you to like reinvent how movies are scored. Like throw everything out. Everything that like came before, like this has to be something like completely new. And I think it is very unique and different. Um, and I also find it interesting that like one of our main like instruments we hear is an organ, which like is so old.
Yes.
It's so old, but like it's so old that it feels new, you know?
Yeah.
Like
And
no
it's
one
used to
no one
perfection.
no one uses an organ outside of like Catholic or Methodist or Presbyterian churches, I feel like. Or like really
Yeah.
like old school churches. And so it's like the organ is really a beautiful instrument if it's played well. And so like the way like it brings that in and it's able to capture such like such power, but at the same time can be very gentle. But then in classic Hans Zimmer fashion, like he puts it through all these like filters and like warps it and like messes with the frequencies in post, and like even like as he's running it through synthesizers as he's recording the score, and just like taking known instruments and just like contorting them into,
Yeah.
and it makes it really feels futuristic in a way in this movie, which I think really I really like. But yeah, the score is just it's phenomenal. I think this is one of Hans Zimmer's best scores.
Yeah, I do too. It's so funny though. Like I listen to so much John Williams, and this is so different from that. And this, I wouldn't say that this is a score that I would listen to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's so tied to the film itself
Mhm.
that I don't think it has nearly the same effect just like listening to it.
It's almost
Um,
like you it's almost like you can't even call it scoring. Like it's almost like creating like a soundscape in a way,
yeah,
if that makes
yeah.
sense.
And yeah, actually, it does. It's so, and it's just like I said, used to perfection,
Yeah.
used to perfection here. Now we kind of move on in the podcast. We're going to be talking about our rosebud and thorn. Jake, passing it off to you as always. What are your rosebud and thorn?
All right. So consulting my handy dandy one sheet of notes here. Had a lot of thoughts to write down on this one. Rose. So I have four. I have four roses.
Okay.
First one goes to Matthew McConaughey. We've talked about it. His performance as Cooper is just flawless. Another rose I'm going to give to all three actors that play Murph. Like I brought up earlier, I think it's always hard when you have a character at different stages in life, because you really have to rely on your actors and actresses in this case to string together that performance to make it seamless, a seamless arc. And so I think all three of the actresses do wonderful here in this movie. Especially, I mean, we see her as Murph, Jessica Chastain. We see her as Murph the longest. So I think she definitely shines. Um, and really like her relationship with Matthew McConaughey's character, and like even though they're apart for so much of this movie, how there's like still that like emotional like cord tying them together, I think is really interesting. So that's going to be a rose. Another rose is going to be the screenplay by Christopher and Jonathan Nolan. Um, like we've talked about, this is such a good story, and like you said it very well. This is a story about people that just happens to be set in space, in futuristic
Right.
other dimensional space. But they craft the story so well, and they get you to care, and they get some real wonderful moments out of these characters. So I have to give a rose to them. And then we just talked about the score. I have to give a rose to Hans Zimmer for the score, um, because it's everything you want and more. And
Right.
so I really like that. Bud, um, it's gonna be a little nitpicky. So the robots, like,
You don't like him?
I don't like how they look.
Okay.
Like they're interesting in a way, how like seemingly like a block of metal with the screen on it can like do so many things. Like they seem like logical in a way, but at the same time, like they just look so stupid. Like to me, they look like a bunch of like, it's basically like if you took Star Wars and replaced all the droids with like these like teetering ATM characters. And it's just it's weird. So
I can see that.
I didn't really care for the design on that. I thought they could have been more. I don't even know if I want to say more original. They could have just been better. So I'm going to do that. And then my thorn. Ah, this happens I think a lot in Chris Nolan movies. I felt like the sound mix. There are points when like I I really don't like subtitles, but there are points that like I wanted to turn on the subtitles because like as much as I loved the score, like people were talking, I couldn't understand what they were saying. Um, Now I know you've talked about some other Chris Nolan movies, i.e., Tenet, that the sound design is so bad that you couldn't understand almost anything.
Yeah.
And there, I would say that there was only like a few moments that it was too much, but I loved the story so much, and I thought it was so well made that I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah. I it's, we're just gonna like harp every week of this series on sound design because it's so annoying.
It's too loud. I'm an old man.
uh
It's too loud.
I so I'm my rose. I have a couple of roses. Um, Matthew McConaughey gets my first rose. I think he is just so good in this. I think it's his best performance. I know we talked about that before, but he just sells it. But man, is he good. He's just so good in this role. I wanted to see even more of him. I like how he calls those robots slick. That's so him too.
Yeah.
Um, Also Matt Damon I gets another rose. I just love Matt Damon in basically anything, but he gives a really good performance here. Um, that of somebody that is determined to, have the mission work in a way, but also not to be stranded and left alone. I thought that was really, really good. Um, I want to give a rose to the cinematography, but also the design of like the event horizon and things like that. All of that kind of effects work was really, really well done. There was so much. It was so believable. I really, really liked it. Um, I guess I have five roses because Christopher Nolan as writer director here shines so much. I really, really like what he did, able to pull out great performances, but also shoot just like a visually beautiful film. And also make us care about physics in a way. And finally, gonna have to give it to Hans Zimmer. That dude, he just it just adds so much to the movie. I know we literally just talked about it, but it just adds so much to the movie. I have to give a rose to the soundscape. I like that. I like that phrasing. Soundscape that he does here. It's just next level. It's next level. It does remind me a lot of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it's better.
It is.
It's better. When it comes to buds, this movie, it's long. It's a long one.
Okay.
I'm glad it's long. I kind of like that it's long, and I feel like it needed to be long for us to have these important emotional moments, but it is long. And so it was kind of hard to uh it's hard to watch in one sitting.
Yeah.
Um but I don't have a thorn, really. Yeah. I don't have a thorn. So next up, we're going to talk about who we think we are. Jake, as always, passing it off to you. Who do you think I am?
So uh,
Oh,
you're gonna
oh
hate this
Lord.
probably.
Okay.
I think you're. I had a hard time keeping the robots straight. I think it's Tars, but it could be
Tars
Case.
is the one that
Wait,
he's the
wait,
first one they meet.
yeah, is he the one that like Matthew McConaughey keeps having to turn down his humor setting?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's you,
Oh my gosh.
because there
You
as much
bastard.
as much as much as I love your humor, there are times that I would feel like humor 75. But no, I mean not even just that. I mean he's helpful to the mission, and you're helpful, but also like he brings levity to what is otherwise a very serious situation a lot of times.
Yeah. Like they
Um,
made that robot really funny.
yeah.
Like he
Um,
was really funny.
I do you would enjoy his humor, so I it's another reason why um you are Tars. Which also like what do those stand for? I want to know.
I don't know. I can't remember, but did they say that he was like a Marine? Like the next
Maybe,
gen
yeah,
kind of Marine?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. He's like a
The,
Swiss Army rectangle. Um he's like
my gosh, when they run and they literally are
that
just
is
like,
so elite. Oh my
why did it just
gosh.
remind me of like, is this like the first
Bro turned into
design?
an asterisk.
What is this like the first design for a Droideka? Like
What?
it
Yeah.
turns into a cog. Literally looks like a cog.
Yeah,
And just is like
yeah, space gray droideka. Master destroyers. Uh anyway,
uh,
for me, I'm gonna say that you remind me of Coop specifically when it comes to the sequence about the moon landing.
yeah, because
Um,
I'd be really pissed if
yeah, and also the fact that you would take Murph to a baseball game. You're like, I could see you going in there and then just being so pissed
if
when
I
they're
went if I go to a parent teacher conference and the teacher's always like, yeah, so like we're talking about the Civil War and like your kids really pushing back on like this whole states' rights argument. As far as like why the South, went to war. I'm like, because it's wrong.
yeah.
You bet your ass I'm pulling my kid out and we're going to a baseball game if we're rather than sit around and teach about states' rights. Like, of course.
Bro literally said, how did it go? Well, I got you suspended. So, and he did it in this Matthew McConaughey way of like, there's a baseball game. A favorite team. I think I'll take her to that and maybe get her some ice cream, some candy. Like I was like, what a savage.
I could
This
literally
dude's
listen to
stone
that
cold.
man. I could listen to that man talk forever.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He's like I said, like we've said multiple times already, he's so good. But yeah, he reminded me of you specifically with I was like, Jake would do something like that.
I would.
Um, Now we're going to move on to final thoughts. Jake, I'm passing it off to you. What are your final thoughts for Interstellar?
Final thoughts. I'm so glad I finally watched this movie. It's so good. I would highly recommend it to really everyone. Like, this is such a well-made movie. I mean, it is a well-crafted story. It's well directed by Chris Nolan. It's well cast. I mean, top down, it's wonderful performances. I mean, you've got people like Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain, Anne Hathaway. We haven't even talked about Anne Hathaway really at
She's a
all.
queen.
And
She's a
like,
queen
she was really good in this movie too. Uh,
and
but
really hot.
well, yes.
Um, yeah,
I wasn't gonna bring that up, but yes. But Matt Damon, the list goes on and on. Really, there's not a bad performance in this movie. And then, the visual effects. I mean, they were so painstaking with the visual effects on this movie. I read somewhere that like they had to like design new software to like basically you would just like plug it in the numbers like a physics equation, and that's how like they made the black hole. And so it's like this, but
that's when you know it's going to be a good movie when they
it's
have
like
to develop a software to get it done.
it's like the most like realistic representation of a black hole like ever on film, and it also took like 800 terabytes of storage.
Oh my lord!
Like, that's insane. I mean, I have a hard drive that I'm pretty sure this is 1 terabyte. I can fit in this hard drive in this case. And so like 800 of these is how much storage
Like
that.
Tanner walks in the door and there's just like stacks on stacks and stacks of terabyte. He's like, "What is going on?" You're like, "I'm making a black hole. I'm making a black hole." Tanner goes, "All right, I'm going
I'm
back to work."
but no, I mean, like, really from beginning to end, every bit of this movie is so well done. Just turn down the volume a little bit on some of the sound design and make the robots less stupid looking, and this is a perfect movie.
Yeah, I think for me, this is top 5 best sci-fi movie ever made. Maybe that's a hot take for some, but I think it's just so brilliant.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of The Martian, which I love as well. Martian may also be in the top 5. I'd actually have to sit down and write a top 5 list, but
It's not leaving a lot
it's
of room for Star Wars.
Star Wars is space opera. It's space fantasy. Like it's not science fiction.
Okay, George Lucas.
Um,
Shout
what a
out to the
king.
one woman who commented recently and said that we're Lucasfilm shills.
Yeah,
They don't pay
yeah.
us, but I wish they did.
They should. They should. Because George Lucas is a freaking king. Um, protect that man at all costs.
Anyway, so sorry to interrupt.
Um, but I think it's just a spectacular film in every sense of the word. I don't really have much more to say other than that. Um, I'm glad I've seen it. I've seen this movie at least 5 times. I've seen it in IMAX at the State Museum. And then I've seen it at home, and it's just such a great experience. And it's so cool. The biggest screen you can see it on, it just makes it for an even better experience. But the question is for you folks. What did you think of Interstellar? Do you like this movie? Is it a top 5 pick for you, or do you not like it? Let us know your comments, your review down below in the comments. We'd love to read that. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ringing that bell to get all notifications on upcoming content. Next week, we are talking Dunkirk to end our Nothing But Nolan series in preparation for Oppenheimer or Barbenheimer, if you're ready for that double feature.
Oh,
Make sure to
mercy.
follow us on social media. We now have an Instagram Threads, which is Meta's version of Twitter. And I can't believe I have that because I haven't had a Twitter since like 2014. But we are using that now. You can follow Jake on Twitter. You can follow the Cinefile on Twitter. And then you can also follow all of us on Instagram. But for Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week for Dunkirk. But until then, Cut.